Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Eva Shao Ojeda, Director of Professional Development at the Light Center. We are so excited to have you here with us today, and we hope you will find the next hour informative, applicable, relevant, and of course, enjoyable. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few ground rules to ensure that everyone has a positive and productive experience. First, please keep your microphones muted throughout the presentation. This will help minimize background noise and ensure that everyone can hear the facilitator clearly. If you have any questions for today's facilitator, please use the chat box to submit them, and we'll try to address them as many questions as we can during this webinar. Finally, we will be recording the session for those who cannot make it live. So by joining this webinar, you're consenting to be recorded. Our slides and the recording will be sent as we normally do, along with extra resources in the April edition of the PD2Go newsletter. So welcome again to the second CAPRI webinar of 2023. We are thrilled to have you join us today for our April Professional Development Initiative, which will explore the first letter in CAPRI, the C, which stands for contextualization. As many of you may know, Westcliff University has established a comprehensive CAPRI approach to teaching and learning that prioritizes contextualized, applied, practical, relevant, and inclusive teaching and learning. Today, we're excited to explore the importance of contextualization in the classroom, particularly when it comes to engaging students' interests and prior knowledge and experience. It is often hard to see the relevance of something when we can't relate to it. And the same goes for our students. That's why during this 1 hour session, we will be discussing ways to contextualize course materials and personalize instruction to individual students' needs. And don't worry, we'll show you that individualizing your course content does not have to be a daunting task. So we want to welcome Professor Jocelyn Sorensen as today's facilitator. Professor Sorensen is the head of curriculum development at Westcliff University. She has worked in higher education and adult learning environments for 20 years in many different capacities, to include department administration, ESL, English as a second language, and instruction in the humanities and social sciences. Jocelyn has worked on several curriculum development committees during her years in higher education and is passionate about teaching world history to bachelor students. So thank you, Jocelyn, for facilitating today's webinar, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ev. So, as Ev mentioned, I love teaching world history, which is why I put the question, what subject in school interested you least, because it didn't seem relevant to you. And I've never asked this question without getting the answer, history. And so I just absolutely love asking this question and seeing that come, because it just reminds me, it motivates me to think about how to bring material alive to my students and how to activate their sense of ownership of their learning, and to bring themselves into the classroom in such a powerful way that they can't help but connect to the material. So that's kind of what drives me and why I love this topic so very much. So please feel free to commiserate in the chat about all the subjects in school that you really didn't like, because it's a really great starting point. So today, not in terms of an agenda, but just as a global look, we're going to look at, I'm just going to recap CAPRI very fast. Professor Shao Ojeda has already done that very briefly. We'll look at contextualization, like really looking at like, what is it? What does it mean? How is it present in our syllabus and curriculum? And then we'll look at very practically building out strategies for how this looks in the classroom. So CAPRI, contextualize, applied, practical, relevant, inclusive. All of these are elements that that come together to create what we call in education significant learning. It's really hard to just separate them out. There's a lot of overlap between them. There's a lot of interplay between these elements. And so you're going to find as you go through these CAPRI sessions that you kind of like have a lot of the same strategies. Sometimes the concepts bleed together a little bit. That's totally fine. Each time that we go through one of these letters, we're just going to be taking like a different focus. So today's focus is this contextualize learning in alignment with student interest and expertise. And so there's a set of assumptions here that that I think for people that work in education, it's something that they've encountered quite often, but like, how does it really work? So students, for example, are not this. What is this? Can someone tell me?
Blank slate.
Yes. Yeah. A blank page, a blank slate, a white paper, however you want to phrase it, right? It's the student is not coming to us as like this empty vessel that just needs to be filled, this blank slate that needs to be written on, but instead they come with perspectives, they come with educational backgrounds that are incredibly varied. They come with various experiences, be it life or work, personal. They come with different languages. They come with training, maybe in a profession, maybe in sports, in leadership, and they come with various skills. And so, oh, sorry, I actually made notes for myself, and it's actually bogging me down a little bit more than it's helping me. So how exactly do we handle this in the classroom? Okay, so for a moment, just silently reflect and answer for yourselves. How confident are you that you are seeing and engaging learners in your classroom? And why are you confident or not confident? And what would you need to gain confidence in that? So I'll give you 1 minute to think silently about that. Okay, so you do not have to write your answers in the chat by any means. I want to revisit this reflection later on in the webinar. So just kind of keep a mental pin in that thought about how you feel about it right now. So contextualization in the curriculum, what does this look like? So what we're aiming to do, and where good pedagogy comes in developing the syllabus, is looking at course design, course content that does the following. It allows for the expression of a variety of learning preferences, for a variety of learner expertise. Remember all that education, experience, training, skills that those students bring in. Well, how do we allow for them to actually express themselves? And so good solid course design and content allows for pathways in which a variety of learning styles and preferences, learning expertise is able to be brought forward, as well as developing autonomy. Autonomy is very important in creating lifelong learners. and in giving students the confidence and the platform to bring their own selves to the fore. So ways that we've done this at Westcliff that maybe many of you have seen as we continue to revamp curriculum and look at kind of updating it, bringing it, thinking about the learner. Examples that I thought of right off the top of my head, infographics or some kind of visual assignment, creating a poster, for example, or creating a narrated PowerPoint where you're able to use all kinds of media, giving presentations, or student work or various forms of peer collaboration throughout the syllabus. So that peer collaboration. Oh, I got out of order. So the peer collaboration is something I wanted to focus on a little bit more, especially in the context of contextualization, right? That like focusing in on student interest, student expertise. As students collaborate together, they are able to further build upon all of these different elements that build skills and build confidence to develop an autonomous learner. So taking responsibility for your own learning and for your own self, learning to be independent of others, building actual skills, be the technical or social, positive interdependence upon other people. No one goes into the workforce and very few people go into the workforce and work solely with themselves and are never held accountable to other people or never have to collaborate with others. So this is a very important skill that we're recognizing that upcoming labor force entries need. And learner motivation is super important, right? If you can't see yourself in the curriculum, how are you motivated to learn it? And then developing that confidence. And it's in building all of these skills, in which collaborative learning is one of the ways in which this is done, that we build autonomous learners, which is essential for that lifelong learning, as well as kind of that having the flexibility and transferable skills to go into all kinds of different areas, as opposed to being rigid and fixed. It creates a growth mindset. So what does this look like in the classroom? So real fast, this is where I'm going to ask you to wake back up. The Jocelyn show is over. Let's brainstorm a couple strategies for making the following things happen. Okay, so I'm gonna outline what this looks like theoretically in the classroom, and I'd like for you to just very quickly, you can do it in the chat or you can unmic yourself and shout out a strategy. How do we strategize this concept? In the classroom, where class activities and the teacher-learner relationship allows for the students' experiences and knowledge to be seen in a meaningful way. Where they allow for the student to actually have access to the content. What do I mean by access? What I mean is that they're able to have a point of contact that makes sense for them. So for example, no one in my family ever went to college. They barely graduated high school. And then I was in college and people were throwing around these really big words that I had no idea what they meant. And I felt very excluded from the conversation because the assumption that was present in the classroom was that you should know these things. And I even had a professor say, well, everyone should know this at this point in their academic journey. And it closed off any opportunity for me to understand the concept, because there was never an opportunity, for example, where the professor explained the concept that was attached to the technical term, which I actually knew, right? So the language created a barrier. There can be other things that create barriers as well for students. cultural knowledge, for example. If we're throwing out cultural references, our international students might have no idea what we're talking about and might not be able to take the lesson that we as Americans, for example, or as Californians, or as North Americans or English speakers have attached to those phrases or examples that we use. And are these classroom activities and the teacher-learner relationship equipping students, actually giving them those skills for them to build autonomy? So I would love to hear very spontaneously what, like off the top of your heads, what are some very specific and concrete strategies for making this happen in the classroom? And while you do that, I'm going to set up breakout rooms. Okay. Ev, would you read what's in the chat while I set up the breakout rooms?
Absolutely. Okay, so yeah, we have really interesting ideas here. Let me just scroll up. Okay, breakout room exercises, trying student prior experiences directly to the concepts, tying, student prior experiences directly to the concepts being discussed in the moment, open discussions of class concepts to determine learning and experiences, real world case studies examples in the breakout rooms, giving students an opportunity to communicate ideas in different ways, verbal, written, visual, classroom discussions to incorporate real world workplace scenarios and what the students have experienced. So these are really, really wonderful ideas.
Wonderful. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to open these breakout rooms. You're going to work. There will be a set of people that stay in the main room. We're going to have to, Ev, would you add that third group to that Jamboard?
Okay, I will.
We have one more group than this morning. So you can use the little sticky notes. You can use, there's a text box down below. And so just put your, move your comment over into the general area on the Jamboard. The question is there for you. But basically what we want to do is expand, collaborate. How do we contextualize those course materials, those like static parts of the syllabus that you're given? How do we contextualize it? How do we bring it to student interest and expertise in the classroom? What are some of those strategies? And after that, then we can look at our answers and look at best practices. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes for this. Opening up the breakout rooms now. Please let me know if you have any questions. Oh, and yes, Ev has put the Jamboard link in the chat. So Professor Nelson, Becker, Robinson, Atwi, and Pantoja, please correct me if I've said your name incorrectly. You'll be staying here in the main room for your discussion. Am I still screen sharing? Can you?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. All right.
I think when I think about that question, one tool that I've been implementing for my students is having them, if we, let's say, review a video or a topic or a concept, what I have them now do is dig further, go deeper. And by having them, let's say it's understanding bias or implicit bias, I have them understand the term, and then I have them create a PowerPoint or an activity around that definition. That's one way I'm engaging them in the experience and then allowing them to make sure that they can now expand upon that and show how they comprehend and understand that by connecting it.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and I kind of do a similar thing, and that was kind of one of the first things that came to my mind is just, I like to have students like go out and research content that's relevant to them, or that's relevant to them, and kind of bringing concepts to life. And so whether it's like researching current events, if that's relevant, or going out and finding a case study that they feel is relevant, and then presenting that back to, working with a small group to develop that idea and then presenting it back to the class. I find that way students are really able to kind of almost find their own access point, or find it in a way that find things that make it relevant for them and kind of applicable to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I think sometimes we can, we can lecture, define things, and we can almost hear ourselves talking. And but for them to jump in and them to know that they can kind of own the understanding of their knowledge, it really is, I think it's vital.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know one of the things too that I think somebody had put in the chat, which I personally found relevant, is just with international students, it can be a challenge. And I've taught a few classes like with our Jordan campus and some other in Nepal, and really I think like allowing them to bring in their own relevant examples is super helpful, because again, some of the cultural references, and I know, I can even hear myself in class sometimes, using a few too many US centric references or examples. And I think, oftentimes we make the assumption that, everybody knows about Facebook, and I teach in the College of Business. So everybody knows about, Facebook and what's going on with Facebook. And that's not always true, especially when we have such a high population of international students. And I find, they're able to bring back examples from, countries they're working in, or, countries that they've come from, to really, I learn a lot from the examples that they're bringing in, but also they're able to make it relevant to kind of what they're experiencing wherever they are in the world.
I just wanted to add, that's such a great point with international business students, but that's encouraging the diversity and collaboration, because in the workplace, as we're teaching business and getting students to understand different dynamics and cultural backgrounds, I like to take the course content because it's good, it's factual, we build on it, and have them give examples of what they've experienced. Like, tell us about a work team you were on and what you contributed to that. And you really find out a lot, because they do want to talk about it. And I think that's the key when we're trying to, especially with the College of Business, is trying to get students to connect, what it's like and how they're going to actually apply this knowledge from the course content. But they want to talk. Students like talking, they like sharing about their experiences, but it's kind of where we need to draw it out of them, and then ensure that everyone feels comfortable with sharing to share their knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Are we supposed to be writing notes? Do you guys know, like, we're breakout room? Are we the main?
Yeah, we're supposed to be taking, I'm trying to take notes. Those.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Mine.
I was like, ours are somehow magically appearing.
Yes, I was going to ask the same thing. Are we supposed to be doing something with this?
Yeah, totally. You have the link on the chat box, and just your ideas, the strategies that you use to contextualize your class. You just add a sticky note or whatever you want.
Look at me, assuming that you all knew what was going on, right?
You know what? Another idea for business classes is statistics. Being able to bring up statistics of actual cases. So you bring up the case study, but statistics help draw that story from what it started to where it finishes. and you know, obviously getting students to research that on their own too, but even like where they are researching their own company and where that company started to where they're at today with their employee population and their revenues, all of that's public. So I think there's a lot that we can do to engage students on the course content.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, you know, particularly in the College of Business, that being able to apply it to the companies that they're in is so critical. And I think it also just adds to that, just makes it feel more relevant. I was kind of to the question we started out on, is like, nobody likes history because it feels irrelevant to some degree. So even using that, I love that, like current employer, just to understand how to think about the concepts and apply the concepts in real life. I know one of the things that I had thrown out in the chat too is, you know, I always try to keep in mind that everybody has different communication styles and different comfort level, particularly when we have a lot of students who English might be their second language, and really providing options in terms of how those interactions can happen. You know I have a lot of students that maybe don't feel comfortable talking in class just because they're just the language is, you know, they just are very unconscious or conscious of their, you know, wanting to be correct in English and so forth. But, you know, so providing the options for, you know, hey, if you want to participate in chat, so you can kind of think about your idea and write it down and send it in the chat, like that's okay. Or, you know, thinking about different, you know, creative or visual type ways that they can convey information, I think is another way. Similarly, with a lot of presentations, like even I found sometimes offering the recorded option of recording their presentation before they have to, you know, where they can then show it in class and then respond to questions, can also be helpful, I think, to make people feel a little bit more comfortable in engaging in a conversation. I'm not sure if you guys have had that same experience or would love to hear any other thoughts that you guys have on that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Robinson. In my experience, those students who are really, really good at answering discussion questions, they love writing, they're not the ones that really participate in my class. They're very quiet. They think twice before speaking because most of them are not native English native speakers. And I relate to that because I also learned English when I was 22 or something. So I can relate to the fact that we have, as you said, different communication styles, and it's our job as instructors to be able to provide the place for everyone to learn. And I like the idea of having different types of tasks and allowing students to express their learning in different ways. It's okay. Some of us are very oral, so we like speaking, some others are not, and it's okay. It doesn't mean that those who are super extrovert and they love putting themselves out there are better learners than others. So we need to make sure that and it's part of contextualization, right? And making sure that students have access to the content that we provide, to the resources that we provide, and be able to make them their own, and by using their context and their experiences.
Yep. Yeah. And Nicholas, I love the comment that you just put in the chat. And I think it's an interesting perspective. You know, I'm from College of Business, I certainly have one perspective, and I'm certain in the technology college, it's completely different in terms of just communication and language and so forth, and really the relevancy, which, you know, it just, I think is a really important point.
Absolutely, Professor
Yeah.
Atwood. I agree that a way to contextualize our content, our courses, is by giving them problems related to their context, their reality, and to find solutions to that. Yeah, absolutely. But how do we do that when we have 25 students from 20 different countries? Really, that's An honest question, right? It happens. We are lucky at the MA program that our classes are very small. So I have 4 students, 6 students. That's the maximum I have had. So I'm able to anyhow get to know all of them. But what happens when you have 25 from so many different cultures and so many different languages? And you need to provide them with access to fair equity, what we call equity. So the access to the content and learning opportunities. How do we do that?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because, and I think that often is a challenge, right? It's easy. A lot of what we're talking about is easy when you have 4 students in your class and you can spend the time as a professor getting to know them and really understanding their styles and where they work and all those things to really bring in that contextualization and making things relevant. But when you're teaching a class of 30 students, it's a challenge to do that for every single student, given particularly because of the diversity, the wonderful diversity that we have.
Exactly. Absolutely.
You know, that's a good point. Oh, go ahead, Nicholas.
I'm terribly sorry. I just can't write nearly as quickly as my mind works, even though my voice is behind both of those. I will try and get through this without a bucolic coughing section. This is just, I want to take part in this conversation so incredibly badly, because this is right up my interest and everything else. I have so much to say about this, because I teach the very first class that all of our students take. It's one of the core classes, MIS 500, Introduction to Information Systems. And then I teach the capstone class, the very last class that everyone takes. And so I'm the troll under the bridge on one end, and I'm the welcoming guide on the front end. But it's such a joy and maybe a class in between every once in a while. But it's such a joy to have the students that I had at the very beginning reach the very end and tell me everything that they've learned, all that they've covered, and to hear that, how can I say this? It's so important to set the tone at the very beginning of inclusivity, of shared interest, of in this time of deglobalization, that the curriculum and the knowledge that we're trying to impart to them is the glue that's going to hold them together as a cohort throughout their entire program. And if they concentrate on that, and if they use our classes as the opportunity to make those connections and those networks, which is what I tell them, you'll never get a better chance to make an amazing group of lifelong friends as you will in these classes. Use that time, and in setting that seed and encouraging them to be open, by the time they reach me at the other end of their journey, first of all, they are awfully glad to see me, but they're also awfully glad to see the students that they've been in classes with throughout the program. Oh, I had you in such and such, and remember we worked on this. So it's that cohort mentality that makes an enormous difference in their perception of not only what they've learned, but of the school and their journey through it. I can't talk anymore. I'm terribly sorry.
I really appreciate your contribution, Professor Becker. Thank you. I'm so sorry that it's difficult for you today. I look forward to future CAPRI sessions where you are feeling better and can contribute fully. So as everybody is re-entering the main room, I would like for everyone to, in their own way, you can do it verbally, you can do it in the chat. What is one thing that you learned, right? That you had not thought of, that you had not ever done before, that one of your peers kind of communicated that you were like, ooh, that's a good one. Professor Lipo, I don't know what's in your toolbox.
That was actually the concept. But what do I have available and access that I can pull out, whether teaching, working with a student, and same thing for students. What are their HR, we call them transferable skills. What can you bring with you? What do you have available to use?
Very nice. Anyone else?
And that's credit to Tom Santa Maria. Hat tip.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, so a couple things to see in the chat are using breakout rooms as an exercise for pairs, and those pairs to be put together based on strengths. I really like that. I really like that idea. Being innovative when we step beyond the terms or what's at the center of the course, ways that students can apply and can use to support them in comprehending new information in new and applicable ways. Leveraging workplace experiences. Oh, I like that. In the toolkit, experience, knowledge, and real-life scenarios connecting students to the concept. Absolutely. So in the, the CAPRI circle with all of the different elements, this is where you get a lot of bleed through. And the focus here is on relevance to the student, not relevance to the workplace or relevance to the industry, but rather how all of those things are relevant to the student as a person. This is kind of it's a socio-emotional direction. Students to adapt the concepts to their experiences. Absolutely, right? Making those really strong connections. Was there anything on the Jamboard that is not represented here in the chat? Sure. Everyone is very quiet today. Well, in the breakout rooms, you all were not quiet, and that's wonderful. And I was corrected. I slipped up and I said pedagogy when I was really talking about andragogy. So point taken. Thank you very much. Which kind of brings me back to something that I didn't go through earlier. When I was so I've been using this word learners, right? And that was actually intentional. I actually, when I first created the PowerPoint, I had students everywhere, right? Students come with perspectives of education. And then I read an email from Dr. Fuller, and I was like, oh man, yes, I was reminded that one of the things that happens when we say student is that we have a certain, or at least in English, there's like a certain kind of feeling that's attached to it. And it's often like a downward direction, right? Students are children, students are young, students are inexperienced, students are learning. But what we're talking about here is, and when we look at our student body, like, yes, that's their role, they're students, but more importantly, or maybe more accurately, they're learners. They are adults, they have families, they have jobs, they have roles that define them outside of being a student, especially in our at Westcliff. And so that's actually a very intentional choice of language throughout, because it especially helps me to think very differently about how I connect with them. And so that's part of part of the purpose here. So as a, can you all see my presentation now? Yes, okay. Getting to know your students, right? That came up many times. Giving students choice in assignments. I heard a couple different examples where that was the case. Giving them choice in terms of format, right? How they present something, how they choose to express their learning. Give them a choice in terms of a topic. For example, if you're talking about a particular concept, maybe criminality in, just in sociology, for example, shout out to Professor DeVito. Then, when you're looking at how students have a choice in topic, like criminality is actually quite broad. So there's a lot of different concepts, a lot of different theories that fall under that chapter that students might really resonate with or might really have a good grasp of because they're able to connect it and giving them an option sometimes in that classroom activity to kind of bring that to the forefront of the class and be able to teach their peers about kind of their little piece of expertise within that chapter. Contextualization means being able to modify for a variety of needs, be it learning preference, be it background knowledge, be it just kind of maybe like where you come from in the world or your language abilities. Another strategy is to give students self-assessment opportunities, give them that moment to reflect on what's working, what's not working, what they don't know, what they need to know, and then be able to make a plan for how to get there. As well as setting personalized goals for students. This is another way for students to start building toward that autonomy that we talked about and making things relevant for themselves within the content. Connecting content to current events. I heard that come up, real life situations, as well as their own experiences and professions, as many of you talked about. We talked about like peer collaboration, right? Using those breakout rooms strategically, and then demonstrating the relevance of the content to the learner. There's also this element, right? Like maybe you are able to see relevance where they are not, and helping them connect is another important part of our jobs. So those are just some best practices. It's not by any means comprehensive, but it's a place to start. And so I'd like to take just one moment, just 1 minute, take time to reflect. How has think back to the original like self-reflective activity. How is your confidence level now? What's changed, if anything? And if you gained confidence, what do you attribute that to exactly? Just take 1 minute. You can either write it in a note to yourself, or you can write for a minute in the chat, however you feel comfortable, and see where you are. Okay, so I see we have quite a few confident people in this webinar, which is amazing. I I think what's important to note is that many people are not confident, and that collaboration is important to verifying, validating ideas that we might have, but be nervous about implementing. And so please always feel free to collaborate with one another as colleagues, receive and give brainstorm ideas on how to connect with students. Please don't let this webinar today be the end of that collaboration. Okay, so we're gonna get real practical. I think almost everyone is teaching this term. Is anybody not teaching this term? If you are not teaching this term, think about the last term you taught. I want you to think about a very specific class session, or course, a very specific, the topic that you're going to be talking about this next coming class session. What are you going to do in that next class session that activates one of these strategies that we've talked about today? So I'm going to somehow find the breakout rooms on my screen. I'm going to reopen them, and we're going to, you can take a screenshot of this, or, just write it down. What's a very practical implementation step to one of these strategies that you can do this week or next?
I guess we're back in our group. I was waiting for the last couple of folks to start. I think for me, and I'm happy to share first, one thing that I felt like I could bring right away, and I'm fortunate that primarily I'm just teaching smaller classes. So really just taking that time to actually just ask students what preference, what type of activities or what type of connection points are they looking for?
Just to add on that, I think that's a good point, and a good takeaway that I have too is thinking about it from the learner's perspective of, not just even adding to what are your experiences, but also collaboration activities even for them to be able to share and connect those course concepts. But people learn in different ways, and especially when we're with the online Zoom environment, it takes some creativity, but we don't want our students to be falling asleep, and we want to make sure that they're engaged, and finding out what makes them more active and more engaged really helps too. So it could be, working on a fictitious scenario and what that means to them, and how they've experienced that type of scenario in the past, but they're with a team.
And I know, Nicholas, you put in the chat, bringing in Chat GPT, which is another fun, on the one hand, one other great tool to be able to leverage information in a very different way, and certainly not without its challenges, but certainly one that can be used to drive a lot of great conversation and activity.
Sorry, I came late. Anybody know, can tell me that what were the items in that strategy very quickly? Okay, thank you. I usually, to engage my students, I go through the assignment that they did previous week and see what they have talked about, and then bring that story in the class. So I will ask them that I may ask you a couple of minutes to tell me more about that story. So the other people pay attention to that story, which the story that they bring, it has happened to their life. And so it will be very interesting for everybody to listen. So it makes them more engaged in the topic. And as here I see, I try to change it in the concept of the teaching of that current week. Like, for example, last week it was talking about the, have you purchased something which you are not satisfied with? So everybody has said something about that thing that they purchased and they were not satisfied. And I try to connect it with the course. So if they were not satisfied, why? Maybe the business did not have a good strategy, or they did not incorporate that kind of issue that you saw, and they were not aware about that. So they did not address it in the plan or a strategy. They can do it next time. They can make a correction to their strategy for improvement of development, or improvement of the business. So I was trying to connecting what they have faced with, because some of them, they just bring it as a story. They cannot connect it with the course. So then I try to do this kind of thing, so the people will be more engaged and it's interesting for them to understand.
Okay, just take one more minute. I'm going to give the rooms one more minute to discuss, and then we'll close out the breakout rooms. So, welcome back, everyone. I hope that you had a productive discussion about specific and concrete ways to implement these strategies in your upcoming class sessions. So what I'd like to do is to kind of round out with a very brief discussion on how do you imagine a regular practice of contextualization is going to impact your classroom learning environment as well as your relationship with your learners? Okay, so in the chat, to help better meet the learning objectives of the course and the program, to make better connections with students, regular practice improves both the live and async portions of the class to create a better relationship, right? Sometimes we don't even see our students because they just submit VCS assignments. Most often use the first class to know about learners and incorporate their experiences into the lessons. Absolutely. Encourage more engagement within the class and students being willing to share and connect the concepts. Tap into the students' frame of reference. Absolutely. Gain more in-depth learning experience. I agree. Is everyone hungry? Is this what's going on? Everyone's just so hungry that they can't talk. Well, I appreciate very much all of your participation today and your ideas and collaboration. I'm going to pass things back off to Ev. It was a pleasure. And I hope to see you all at the next CAPRI session.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for facilitating today's webinar. I would like to express our gratitude for your practical and informative session. Your insights have been incredible value. I believe like this has been a really practical and engaging webinar that we can take advantage of. So as we conclude today's webinar, we would like to extend an invitation to all of you to attend our next professional development webinar on online engagement on GAP. This webinar will take place on May the 16th at 8 a.m. and 12 noon Pacific time. During the session, we will explore the importance of investing time and effort into improving student engagement on GAP. We understand that keeping students engaged while completing their weekly tasks on GAP can be challenging, but we've got you covered because during this session, we are going to be discussing different strategies that you can use to maintain student engagement and meet the online engagement requirements set by Westcliff University. So we hope you will be able to join us for this informative session next month, and we look forward to seeing you all there. So finally, please make sure to take the survey afterwards because we want to hear your opinion about this session. So I'm going to add the link to the chat box. There you go. Give me just a sec. There you go. So please do not forget to complete this form. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear about how much you liked this session and other topics that you want us at the Light Center to cover for professional development purposes. So thank you for taking the time to join us today, and we hope you enjoy the webinar and hopefully see you all next month. Bye, everyone.